Hush, little baby, don't... Get him out of here!
Is the thrill he craves.
I want to know the connection between the elves and the Nazis.
The elves were a genetic engineering experiment. The Nazis did have some clever scientists. This was before today's technology, of course. Each elf was to house the haploid gene structure in its sperm cells to produce the master race. Once again, magical powers can't be hurt or killed. Driven to select the genetically perfect human mate, the proverbial virgin, of course. Holy midnight consummation on Christmas Eve.
Are you asking if I believe in elves? No, I don't. But God did.
You were a goddamn Nazi, that's what you were. You were one of them.
What's wrong? Are we gonna be alright?
No, Willie, Gramps is a Nazi.
The idea of my daughter spending the night with a man twice her age?
Don't you ever listen to anything?
I don't think you understand, ma'am. Your daughter's in great danger. These men are trying to kill your daughter. And besides that, there's that creature.
Hey, this is Russ Manzap, the writer of Rush Week, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to a very festive edition of The Hysteria Continues, episode 274, which isn't a particularly festive number, but we are covering a very festive little film for your Christmas delectations this time, Elves from 1989. And we're joined by a very special guest, Dan from the Remedial Film Class podcast. Dan, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm doing really well. I didn't realize you guys record at sunrise. I think that's really an interesting gimmick. You should keep that going.
Fuck you.
It's only because, I'm sure as you know, we're a transatlantic podcast. I live off the coast of Africa and Erik lives in Ireland, so we're all over the world. So actually for us, me and Erik, it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
So we have the better side of the deal. What time is it where you are in Kansas?
Oh, it is 7 a.m. Bright and early on a Sunday morning. Hours to go until my Chiefs play football, so I've got a lot of time to prep the barbecue grill, I guess.
Excellent. And I was listening to Remedial Film Class podcast, your episode on sleepaway camp, which was a lot of fun because your podcast it's kind of an intriguing kind of concept, isn't it? That you've got a friend who's not very well versed in movies, and you and your fellow co-hosts kind of school him. Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, we traumatize this poor guy week by week. Originally, we were just going to show him the mainstream movies that any normal human should have seen by their mid-30s, but we've taken it upon ourselves to deviate now and then and show him stuff like Sleepaway Camp, which, true art in its purest form. I'm generally like the 90s kid. I'm showing him stuff he should have seen because he's my age. His brother-in-law is the other guy on the show. He's Mr. like nostalgia for the 80s and full of heart. So I show him stuff that his brain should have seen. His brother-in-law shows him stuff that his heart should have seen. And occasionally we watch good movies too.
Excellent. Well, like Sleepaway Camp, of course.
Like Sleepaway Camp, exactly.
It kind of divided your crew, didn't it? But I think was there was kind of a heart down the middle, wasn't it, really? I think it's one of those films you either get or you don't get.
It was the most surprising episode for me because generally the film virgin George doesn't like movies that are fun to watch. He only likes good movies. He's kind of pretentious. But Sleepaway Camp hit it just right down the middle that he was on my side of that one. And so you can ask how much fun did I have doing that episode, and I would tell you a whole bag of fun.
Fantastic. Well, it remains to be seen which side we come down to. This is kind of your choice through Joseph, isn't it? Elves.
Yes, I might have pulled a remedial on you guys if you hadn't seen this movie before. This is one I'd hoped you'd seen previously, and if you haven't, I'm so happy to have shown you.
Well, it remains to be seen where we've fallen. It's a first-time watch for me, I must admit, but we won't get into it. We will get into it after we talked about our recently seen, but very glad to have you on the show, Dan. So thank you for joining us.
Here, guys. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm sure it won't be the last time, so thank you very much. And Erik, how are you doing?
I'm cold.
Are you cold? Oh, I know. You've got a cold snap, haven't you, where you are?
Yes. So I've got my hot water bottle with me.
So, well, anyway, I'm sure you'll be toasting some chestnuts to elves. and I'm sure some of this the delightful dialogue probably warmed you up. So. And Nathan, I imagine out of all of us, Elves is probably something that you would have seen and cherished in the past.
You guys are going to be very shocked by this, but this was the first time I've watched Elves.
Wow. Okay. Is this the first time for all of us? Yeah. Joseph, what about you?
Yeah, I had it in my mind that I'd seen this before, and I owned the old AIP VHS at one point in time, but watching the movie to prep for the show, none of it really seemed familiar. So it may have been my first time. Okay, well, Dan, see what you've done. You've actually, a rarity, you found a film that none of us had seen before. So is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, the jury is out, but we'll talk about that after we sort of mention some recently seen. And as our special guest, Dan, is there anything you've seen recently you want to tell us about?
Well, I just got the Vinegar Syndrome release of A Evil Laugh, and I have to say, wow, came out of left field for me a little bit. I'd missed the whole, rare DVD collection period for that odd little movie. Quite enjoyed it. Had a very strange commentary track, but I won't talk about that. But a heck of a release. Also for the show, we just finished watching Gremlins, which I'd never seen before. I think I prefer Elves, but that episode just launched, so have a listen to that, guys. And Whirlpool, one we did for the show that I'd seen before, the Laraz one. As soon as I finished that one, which has a lot of overlap with Elves plot-wise, I've been going back through the Laraz catalog for the last few weeks. Once I watch one, I gotta watch them all. I don't know. That guy is my kind of weird.
Okay, I'm trying to think. I think I have seen Whirlpool. That's the one. Is that the one set in the British countryside?
Yeah, that's British countryside. There's a photographer and his aunt, who's actually not his aunt, we hope, because they have a sexual tension you shouldn't have with your aunt, and they seduce women and bring them back for quote-unquote photography sessions in the woods. It's kind of a precursor to Last House and Friday the 13th by way of British countryside.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I have seen that one, but excellent. Anyone else seen Whirlpool?
I don't know. I'm thinking I might have because didn't we do a commentary for one of his films?
Yes. Which one was that? Not Deadly Manor. It was Edge of the Axe, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I probably watched it around then, but now that you're speaking of it, it doesn't ring any bells.
Okay. Well, anything else, Dan?
Last thing I'd watched recently was Nope, the Jordan Peele. And I'm not a big that particular genre fan. I won't talk about it too much because they don't really tell you much in the trailer. But probably the most legitimately creeped out I've been in a movie experience in five or 8 years. Like, real good. That guy makes good movies.
Excellent. Okay, I think most of us enjoyed that one, didn't we? I think that was right up your alley, Erik, wasn't it?
Ish.
I
had some problems with it, but I need to rewatch it, I think.
Okay. Well, I think there is one. There's a kind of an elephant wrapped in tinsel in the room, isn't it? As far as films go. So, Joseph, I shall let you kind of talk about that particular film.
Oh, gee, thanks a lot, Justin. Yes, I watched Christmas, Bloody Christmas. It's the 2022 film about a killer Santa robot, and that's the basic plot of the film, and it's a neat idea. Unfortunately, it is inhabited by the worst, and this is like Rob Zombie level characters here, where every other word is an expletive. Fuck this, fuck that, motherfucker. Every variation of the word fuck you can think of is uttered in this movie 100,000 times, and it's so loud and so shrill, and I just don't get it. I don't get why directors and writers today seem to narrow in on the worst traits possible of this generation. It just doesn't make any sense. You can't relate to the characters, so you don't care if they die. And I sat there and hoped beyond hope that all the characters in this film, bar the robotic Santa, would die. And I got my wish in some aspects, but in some aspects I did not. And the lead character is this girl who thinks she's better than everyone, and she has a problem with Christmas, and she's really pretentious, and like I said, every other word out of her mouth is F this, F that. And it gets so monotonous and so boring that, all the goodwill that this film does build up with some of the stalking scenes and some of the visuals, I mean, they're just kind of, shrugged off in favor of like really bad characterization, really bad writing. It's very juvenile. I don't want to talk about this movie anymore. I hated it.
Okay, well, tell us how it is. Dan, have you had the displeasure yet, or the pleasure?
Not yet. No, I've seen the advertising and some of the social media stuff, but as big a fan as I am of Christmas slashers, this one looked a little too no thanks for me.
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting. The trailer kind of hooked me. I thought the trailer looked good. Nathan, have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
Okay. And Erik, have you...
Not yet, no. I was intending to watch it. I'm not sure if I will now, because you know how much I dislike the Rob Zombie type sweary shrillness. So I might steer clear.
This one this one isn't as mean-spirited as a Rob Zombie film, but it's just as shrill, so you wouldn't be missing much, Erik.
Yeah, I do like the idea of Robot Santa killing people.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a great premise, a kind of cross between Silent Night, Deadly Night and the Terminator. And apparently it was the original pitch was for a reboot of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. But obviously it didn't go that way. I mean, I made it through 25 minutes of it before we turned it off last night because it was giving Stuart a migraine. He couldn't bear it anymore. So I turned it off. And I must admit, I found it a difficult watch just because it was, I just don't for me personally, these kind of retro 80s slasher movies or horror movies, they kind of just really miss the point. I mean, a perfect case in point is something like Elves, or certainly the first half of Elves, where it's just kind of like silly and fun and campy. And the characters, in this is, you kind of in 80s horror movies, you had the bitches and the jocks and the annoying characters, but they were kind of leveled out by kind of characters you actually rooted for and you wanted to see survive, and you had fun with them. You actually enjoyed their company before they were killed. Whereas in this, it's just this kind of it's just bizarre kind of this idea that you want to spend time, half an hour, this couple bickering, drunkenly staggering from bar to bar, arguing about which hair metal band had better hair, and swearing all the way through it. It just it's not a fun setup, and I couldn't really understand what they were going for. So I might skip that first 25 minutes and try and enjoy the rest of the movie. Does it get better?
It doesn't get any better. It gets louder, if anything. I mean, like I said, some of the visuals are awesome, but
yeah.
The audio is just like you need to turn it down to like 1 to bear it.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because I'd say the trailer looked great. It did look like a real mashup between like Terminator and Silent Night, Deadly Night. So I just don't. But anyway, I mean that's I tipping my hat already. I would say I'd much rather rewatch Elves. So let's see. Is there anything else you've been watching, Joseph?
Last week I talked about I saw the first half of Knives Out and I was going to finish it for this episode, and I did not. So I'll eventually get to Knives Out, but no, that's all I've watched this week.
Okay, well, fair enough. Thank you, Erik. How about you?
No, nothing.
Well, we are because I've been binging films from 2008 for our top 3 of 2008. So. I imagine you've been doing the same. If you've managed to fit any in around those gin and tonics, Erik.
I'm not hungover.
Are you not? Are you sure?
I was yesterday, but not today.
Okay. Well, normally, I say, Dan, you have escaped the fact that normally this is our drunk cast. So we normally have our Christmas episode is usually a drunk cast, but we're not. We're going to find another reason to do a drunk cast at some point in the new year, I imagine.
If you can make it through Elves without a drink, maybe this went better than I thought it did.
Well, absolutely. So, and actually, funnily enough, I saw on my Facebook page, the Hysteria Lives Facebook page, and I think it was Graham Wright. It was one of the people said that they would have rather, talking about drunken characters, they would have rather seen a film with Nathanian drinking Nathan talking about being knighted. That would make it much more entertaining drunk.
And then falling asleep.
Well, absolutely. No, it would be. I'm sure it would be much more entertaining anyway. So, and Nathan, I can't remember. Have I asked you Have you seen anything?
You have before, but not today.
Not today. Well, have you?
No. It's that time of year where, it's just busy Christmas stuff. And there's like Christmas movies I watch, both horror and non-horror every year, but it's stuff I've already talked about. So it's not really much else to say, except I watched one with a very interesting ink pen.
If you don't remember, that was Black Christmas from 2006.
Oh, of course. So, and there's also, has anyone seen Violent Christmas yet?
Violent Night.
Yeah, it's not a horror, right?
No, I don't think so.
It's basically Die Hard with Santa Claus in the role of John McClane, I assume.
Yeah, well, so I've maybe checked that one out. But yeah, because we were looking for some friends are coming over to watch some Christmas horror movies. So that's why I was watching the Christmas Bloody Christmas, which I don't think we'll watch. But I might go for Don't Open Till Christmas instead.
About Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3? The classic.
Maybe not.
No, if you're going to go with one of those, go with Part 2, Garbage Day.
Well, there you go. Perfect viewing for Christmas. So we're also talking about perfect viewing for Christmas. Let's see if Elves are.
An innocent romp in the woods turns into a hellish nightmare when 3 young girls accidentally awaken an army of evil elves, in quotation, genetically created by a neo-Nazi mad scientist during World War II. These hideous creatures don't work for Santa. They have a special mission: to mate with a virgin and take over the world as a pint-sized master race. Dan Haggerty of Grizzly Adams fame stars as Mike McGavin, a department store Santa who must expose this unholy force and stop the gruesome terror before the elves destroy Christmas. Yes, so Elves. To start, the elephant in the room, is this a slasher film? I would say no. The elves, in quotation, in so much that it's actually just a singular elf. It does bump off a few people in various slasher movie ways. I mean, we got knife slashings, a bathtub electrocution, and it even has its own POV shtick that's kind of popularized by killers climbing up, lattice work or pulling back tree branches. The lead character of Kirsten, she's your typical slasher movie type teenager in that she's played by an obvious 25-year-old who only wants to sneak off to the woods or the local shopping mall to partake in anti-Christmas pagan rituals, as you do. And in probably the most slasher setup there is, she sneaks into said shopping mall with a couple of her friends, a la The Initiation or Hide and Go Shriek, to sort of hang out with a gaggle of boys who never show up. But what does show up is that elf and Grizzly Adams himself as the store Santa, who gets kind of mixed up in what would appear to be a slasher movie plot in the making, except here's the swerve. Kirsten is also the last in a line of pure-blooded Aryans brought into this world through ritualistic incest to mate with the elves and create a master race of elf-human hybrids. And it's documented in kind of vagaries throughout history as the work of mad scientists, Nazis, taking orders from Hitler. So yeah, if that's not a plot to entice you, I don't know what is. Elves, it felt to me like something Norman J. Warren would have produced if he were given a cheap camera, and often he was, and a bump of the blow. He may have, I don't know. I don't want to make any insinuations there, and kind of left to his own devices during the holidays. I mean, there are a number of great scenes and characters, and the characters are so quirky that I didn't actually care if this was a slasher or not. First off, we have Kirsten's mother, and she's this horrible housefrau who kind of bullies her daughter. I mean, she steals her money out of her bank account, and she has a penchant for drowning cats in a toilet for some reason. I think the cat might have slighted her just barely, and she just decides to put it in a pillowcase and drown the poor thing. I mean, she's a terrible human being, but she's kind of fun to watch, and I think the only thing missing from her was like a glass of wine that she could have threw on someone, a la Nathan. Dan Haggerty, he's here as well. I don't think he's here for any other reason than to give the film a sort of name recognition and to get tangled up in all the kind of expositional scenes. He also gets to smoke a lot. I mean, he's always smoking no matter where he is. The actress playing Kirsten, I thought she was a lot of fun, and she reminded me a bit of someone like Jennifer Runyon from To All a Good Night. I felt that, while I liked Dan Haggerty and was glad he got a paycheck, he does seem kind of bored at times, and he detracts from the Kirsten character, who I loved. And he has that kind of, that quote unquote male savior complex that's kind of typical from movies of this time period, where, like, you know, we don't want a woman to, you know, carry the film herself. We need a man in there. So they threw in Dan Haggerty of all people. But, you know, it's Dan Haggerty. You can't complain too much. The elf in question, there's no elves in this film, by the way. It's just one elf. There's a reason why we never see it from head to toe. We either see its feet or the bust shot. And the effects, I don't know, it feels like someone purchased a bunch of slime from the set of You Can't Do That on Television and then slathered this cheap creature statue that you'd see in the back pages of old Fango magazines. But, you know, I didn't care. I like that. That sort of stuff just kind of tickles my fancy. But overall, I really actually enjoyed the audacity of Elves and that it's sort of mired in cheap effects and a very minimal budget. I think they spend most of their movies like just buying junk cars and then flipping them over and lighting them on fire. All that stuff I think has a real charm to it. It also has a good sense of humor about itself, and it contains what might be the best line in movie history when Kirsten's little brother, Willie, shut up, Erik, asks aloud, "Are we going to be okay?" And then Kristen replies with perfect deadpan monotone, "No, Willie, Grandpa's a Nazi." That line had me laughing so hard, my sides hurt. But Dan, it's a very interesting choice, even if I personally don't feel it would normally qualify for our main show. But, you know, all that aside, what made you foist Elves upon us, Dan?
Are you guys familiar with the song Wolfie's Just Fine, A New Beginning? It was a YouTube thing put out by the guy that played Taco on The League, about him being like a little child and being exposed to Friday the 13th Part 5 way too young.
I have seen that one, yeah.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
This was my Wolfie's Just Fine movie. We were down the street, unsupervised. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and the scary neighbor kid who we shouldn't have been hanging out with brought us over a taped off HBO video that had this and Texas Chainsaw Massacre: A New Generation on it. And so I was just like, hey, that sounds like a movie I shouldn't watch. Let's check it out. And so Elves is my first slasher. And in a lot of ways, when that mall Santa takes one in the side and the blood spews out of his mouth, that is the moment I became the me that I am today. Which explains a lot if you look at our movie choices on our show. But this movie's insane. It's underseen. I had to buy a DVD from Germany, which, with the Nazi subplots of this movie, really makes you wonder why it's only available on DVD in Germany. But it's one that I've shown a few people. It always starts off negative and it always ends up positive because eventually you realize this movie isn't going to get any more serious. And Grandpa's a Nazi and also her father. So I thought it would be a good little time. I just assumed that half of you had seen this by now. I didn't mean to remedial film class everybody in the room, so my bad. And also, you're welcome. I do love that they gave Dan Haggerty, the Grizzly Adams guy, his chance to Donald Pleasance a role. You know, he became kind of your Ahab of the plot. But then you look at where Pleasance was in 1989 with like Halloween 5 and The House of Usher, right? So really, they nailed it. They nailed, hey, do you want to be Loomis for Halloween, but actually the Loomis of today's Halloween, not the one of the 70s. And in that case, I'd say that Haggerty kind of nailed it.
And they probably told him, hey, and Michael Myers is a diminutive little ghoul.
Yes.
In place of Michael Myers.
And you get to do,
he's like,
you get to smoke like fetishistically. Like, it's not just a habit. It's like the thing that keeps you moving.
Yeah, he's like out of a job and he's like getting evicted from his trailer, but he still has enough money to buy a carton of cigarettes.
And carries around with him like it's his, like it's a tome or something. I don't know. That was interesting. I wonder if that's how they paid him, was just in cigarettes.
Feasible, I'd say.
Well, apparently there was a lot of snow on set, wasn't there, in all senses of the word?
I imagine in the writing room, at least.
Well, there's a great behind-the-scenes story about that, which we might get to a little bit later. But yeah, well, chip in with some more thoughts on this, Dan. Well, let's see what Erik, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, It was a very bizarre movie. It had an unusual structure, I thought, because the middle act, when the girls break into the department store to spend the night, is normally what you'd expect to be the final act of a film like this. You think of The Initiation or Hide and Go Shriek. But in this instance, it's kind of the middle act, and it's a springboard to even more insanity after that, involving, the Nazi cult and incest and all that type of thing. What really struck me from the start of this film, though, was that we've said the name actor in the film, Dan Haggerty, is so bad in this. All the unknown actors are pretty good, but he's like, his first appearance, he seems to be on horse tranquilizers or something. He mumbles his way unenthusiastically through the film. You can really see why his career petered out after Grizzly Adams, because he's dreadful in this, I thought. But that's kind of part of the fun. I mean, I loved the three girls who look like they're going to be the sort of dominant force in the film. They're very ditzy, and they have that wonderful conversation that went, no way, no way, whatever. And I also liked the line, "Look, I dreamed those Art Deco boobs," which is, a first and possibly a last time that line will ever be used in a film. And they all have big hair and shoulder pads, and, this always gets bonus points from me. It's just a shame that two of them are killed off halfway through the film. Because for me, that's the better half of the most interesting section of the film for me is the girls in the department store, and I would have liked maybe more of that. It works so well, and as I said, The Initiation and Chopping Mall and that, I feel the film it does get more insane, but I feel the film moves down a gear once the department store part of the film is finished. As for the elf itself, which rhymes, I thought the design of the creature was okay for a film of this budget. The problem for me is that it's really inarticulate. There's no facial movements at all, so it has this one expression that kind of reminded me of the open mouth default position for Napoleon Dynamite. It has this God type of expression on its face, which makes it seem ludicrous, and its feet are very, very Muppet-ish as well. But again, all part of the fun. I thought like the scenes towards the end where Kristen, whatever her name is struggling in a fight with the elf, I thought were incredibly unconvincing, but in a very good way. I also loved Kirsten's horrible, horrible family. Her mother is just unbelievably evil. She steals her money, kills her cat in the toilet. And she has this little brother who, at the start of, for the first half of the film, he seems to be based on that little shit from the Boogeyman. He has an unbelievably potty mouth. You've got big fucking tits, and I'm going to tell everyone, which is a great line. But then he sort of mellows in the second half, and he's more childlike, and he believes in Santa and all this type of thing. It seems really, really weird. As for the film's festive appeal, it didn't feel terribly Christmassy to me, but this is a problem with a lot of Christmas slashers. They're kind of have a Christmas tree thrown in the background of one scene to justify its Christmassiness, but it just feels flat in that department. If you think of the original Black Christmas, feels very lush and ornate and festive, whereas this one doesn't. It feels slightly wintry, I'll give it that, but and it's certainly far more Christmassy than Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3. But no, my overall thoughts on the film was, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's really, really bizarre. I would personally have liked more of the ditzy girls in the film because I thought they were really good fun. But as it is, I thought it was pretty good and very like that second half certainly is unique, shall we say, with its Nazi incest elf mutation subplot going on. Yep. So I did enjoy Elves, the first time watch, as I said. Hadn't really heard of it. But they could have saved a lot of money by not employing Dan Haggerty, because he might as well not be there because he's dreadful in it. And that's saying something coming from me because he has a beard.
He's just kind of superfluous. I mean, they don't really need him. He just goes around getting exposition, and anyone could have done that. Although, Eric, you mentioned the Art Deco boobs. I love how that figures into the plot with the Nazi symbols on the nipple later in the film. It's like, okay, what else is this film going to do?
Well, Nathan, what did you think?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic, of course. It's very over the top and just completely ridiculous. I mean, and I knew it right from the get-go. I mean, I love Eric, I love the three, like, kind of ditzy, girls from the beginning who are in this cult, this anti-Christmas cult. I mean, I just thought it opened, like, ridiculously. And then, like, when she gets home, her grandfather just wheels up to her and slaps her out of nowhere. And then when she tries to say something, he hits her again. I'm like, I'll push you over.
She's too nice to do that.
Wheel his ass into oncoming traffic. See how he likes that.
I mean, he is a Nazi, so...
This is true.
I don't know that you can wheel Grandpa Daddy into traffic, though. That's a heck of an insurance claim.
Yeah, watch me.
Like Erik, like the little brother, just yelling about or screaming out about his sister's boobs and everything and wanting to tell everybody he saw them. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a little odd. I do love the line where Kristen says she had a rough day at work because Santa got murdered. Just so sad, like you would say if I had a rough day, it was very busy at work. That's how she says it, like Santa got murdered. Rough day, I love when the girls are talking about having sex and one of them is like, I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I don't like confrontation. So it's like, okay, she don't like to say no. So that's, what's going to end up happening with her, I guess. I love the scenes in the mall. I thought that was awesome. And like Erik, I think that's the kind of movie that I prefer. Is the whole like breaking into the mall and getting picked off. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a good movie because I think it is an excellent film. It just didn't go exactly where I wanted to or where I thought it was going to, I should say. I love that the mom is just, like you said, she's like just so unbelievably evil. Like the drowning the cat scene, I was just like this is awful. And just earlier, Kirsten said that the cat was the only friend that she had. And then her mom's going to go and drown it in the toilet. I'll put her head in the toilet. Give her a swirly.
A swirly? Is that what they're called?
Well, that's what, yeah, I guess in our area, that's what they call it when you put someone's head in the toilet and flush it. And, it like swirls their hair up because when you flush a toilet, the water goes in a circle.
Have you had that happen to you, Nathan?
No.
Have you done it to someone?
I feel like it's more of a movie bullying tactic. I'm not saying it's never happened in real life. I'm sure it has, but I never knew of anyone at my school that happened to.
Oh, fair enough.
But anyway, no, it's a great, great fun movie. I'm very glad that I finally watched it. I mean, it's probably the best movie I've seen about Nazis and Elf and some ditzy characters in a shopping mall. So hey, it's got that going for it.
And there's a vast sea of them out there, so that's a high honor.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nathan. I think I'm the only one that hasn't put my penny worth in. So I say it's first time watch for me as well, as I mentioned. I think I saw the version on YouTube, which I'm right in thinking this hasn't got a VHS it has got a VHS release way back in the day, but it hasn't been released on DVD or Blu-ray in the United States. So the version I saw on YouTube was okay in the lighter scenes, but in the darker scenes towards the end of the movie, it reminded me, and I've mentioned it before, way back in the mist of time when we watched E.T. on bootleg video in 1982, and it just looked like a potato moving in a sea of static and darkness. So it's very difficult to work out what was going on. So it's a little bit similar with this. Now it's a strange film. I enjoyed it because I especially loved, say, the three teenage girls, which all, especially I loved their anti-Christmas activists doing a pagan ritual they just happen to be in woods right above where the Nazi elf is buried. But, it's coincidences kind of make horror movies, I guess. I loved the fact that they all sounded like Jan Brady at the beginning. And how much of it was self-conscious, I don't know. Whether or not they were, how much was tongue-in-cheek with this movie, it's a bit open to debate. I'd be interested, Dan, do you think it was kind of done tongue-in-cheek, or do you think it was done seriously? Sometimes it's difficult to tell with these kind of later 80s, early 90s movies.
I wouldn't want to pin down the intent of the director. I would say that the execution ends up being a healthy mix of both, sort of a slumber party massacre, but with incest elves.
Yes, well, you could put it that way. I say it's got some great dialogue in it. I like, again, the mum is such a bitch in it, and the actress, I think it's Deanna Lund. I think she was in, is it Island of the Giants or some 60s TV show? I was surprised to see that she got the only nudity in the movie, considering she was kind of an established kind of TV star anyway, albeit one where she's being electrocuted in the bath. It kind of started off, it's kind of like a Santa's grotto of influences, isn't it? Because it has a pinch of everything, obviously with the elves, with the Nazis, with the incest, and the slasher movie thing. You really kind of think it's going to kick in with the first store Santa, who kind of doesn't he say to one of the characters that he'd exchange snow for oral, which is not what you really want your Santa to do. But
that's how I get all my blowjobs, by the way.
But then the elf kind of kills him with a knife, which I think is that the only time the elf kind of uses a knife. But it starts, you can imagine, he gets stabbed in the crotch, and a bit almost like a homage to Don't Open Till Christmas, where there was the Santa gets castrated while he's having a piss. So it was kind of, it felt like then, and then like you mentioned, Erik, was that whole setup with the department store. It very much felt like it was a setup for this kind of showdown of, the killer elf against the three teenage girls. The three boys would turn up. You'd have Dan Haggerty. They'd all be bumped off one by one. That felt like it was going like that. And then it kind of did a switcheroo completely into this kind of madcap kind of Nazi Raiders of the Lost Ark with incest and one elf. It's kind of, so it's a kind of real kind of mindfuck of a movie. Having said that, I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I would love to see a decent cleaned up version of it, which made the end of the movie kind of watchable, because for me it just kind of, I couldn't really I could more or less make out what was going on by the sounds on the screen, but it did ruin it a little bit for me. But yeah, overall it was kind of for like a no budget horror movie from 1989. I thought it was a lot of fun. So Dan, I think we're across the board, we're varying degrees of festively delighted with this. So, thank you for your remedial lesson for today. I think it's been a success.
I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it. It's definitely for this crowd, right? Like, you guys and your listeners are going to enjoy this movie. This is not the movie I'd show a girl on a first date. It's not a surefire bet, but it really does deliver if you've got the right mindset.
Yeah, you save it for the second date.
Or when you're married and then there's no choice. But
you want a divorce.
You want a divorce, yeah. But it's kind of interesting. It's going back to your sleepaway camp episode where I think you had that kind of thing going on, didn't you? If people didn't have the mindset of enjoying sleepaway camp for what it was and for its campiness, and if you kind of judge it as a good, inverted commas, good movie, because I think one of your guests, or maybe it was one of the other co-hosts, was saying that it would have been better with better actors in the sleepaway camp.
He says that every week, though.
Oh,
you
does
can't
he?
listen to him.
Okay. But it's kind of, part of the joy of watching, inverted commas, fun bad movies is, and I say that in a not a disparaging way, because, they enjoy a good bad movie. And sometimes that kind of slightly non-professional acting style can just add that sense of fun to a movie, and I think it does that here as well, because from what I was reading, quite a lot of the people in the cast were not professional actors, which may shock you to hear. But it kind of adds that sense of fun, and I think for a lot of people who've got like a inverted commas straighter sense of watching movies or what they think of as a good movie, they immediately turned off by that. But like you said, Dan, is if you're kind of attuned to like a fun 80s kind of low budget monster horror slasher movie with sometimes bad acting, it just adds that extra sense of fun to it, and actually is a boon rather than a problem for a movie. So yeah, this had like so much going on in it. I think possibly too much going on in it for me. They could have pared out a few of the elements, and also maybe an extra elf or two might have helped, perhaps, to justify that title. But of course, it did end on. Did it end on the idea that she was impregnated by the elf?
It did, although given the video quality of what's on any release, including, I'm gonna have to warn you guys, the German DVD is pretty much it looks like a VHS rip. It doesn't look like a Video Master repurposed. It looks like somebody had a VHS tape, ripped it with unprofessional equipment, and put it on DVD.
It wouldn't be the first time, because I don't know what it is about Germany, but for quite a while there seemed to be lots of bootleg releases of copyright-written movies that were put out on kind of grey labels. So there must have been some kind of weird copyright loophole in Germany, which possibly explains that version. But it kind of, for me, it seems like a no-brainer that someone like Vinegar Syndrome would pick this up, if the original elements still exist, of course, which of course is one of the problems, I think, for quite a lot of movies, is that they can't find original elements to do a decent release of.
Yeah, I've been bugging Brad over at Vinegar Syndrome for, I think, 4 years straight. Just about every October, I start Elves season. Hey, Brad, how about Elves this year? How about Elves? And they're aware of it. One of my buddies, Aaron, actually the guest from the Sleepaway Camp episode, popped into the archive one time. I was like, hey, is Elves coming this year? And they're like, not this year. Nope. You know, my understanding is that, well, I'll repeat the rumor. The rumor I heard was that the film was shot on 35 millimeter, but then it was edited on video. So they like transferred and then did all the work on the video side. So there's a chance that even if they have the original film elements, it may take like a New York Ninja style recomposition to get a true cleaned up Blu-ray of this. So, I mean, it's worth it, guys. Come on. Like, this movie's worth the work. And I guess I'd volunteer to help any way you need. Dan from Remedial will be happy to lend his time to help get this movie a real Blu-ray, please.
Well, dreams do come true. Whoever thought something like Evil Laugh would get a Blu-ray release way back in the day? So who knows? I'm sure, given the amazing kind of obscurities that Vinegar Syndrome and Arrow and other labels managed to dig out, then I'm sure this will happen one day. So dreams do come true. But well, let's talk a little bit about some background on this. And as our guest, Dan, do you have anything you want to share? Anything you found?
I couldn't find anything that wasn't just IMDb level trivia for this one. The one thing I'd point out, we just... yeah, I saved Nathan's spot. I'm not going to take away from him. But we recently watched Coming to America for the show, for Remedial Film Class podcast. And one of our favorite parts, the thing that got everybody in the room laughing, was when they see what should be a chalk outline, but is clearly a masking tape outline of a cane and a dead man. And in this movie, to see the masking tape style outline of the dead Santa that remains in the room that Dan Haggerty is staying in, with the blood puddle in the crotch region. If you don't notice that detail because of your, if it's not clear on the YouTube, go back, brighten your settings, check out the blood splatter in the man's, in the boarding room, at dick level, Santa dick level blood. This movie rocks, guys. One other piece of background from my own personal experience: the little brothers annoying brothers, Ninja Turtles pajamas. My best friend growing up had those exact pajamas, and so this kid is exactly, I guess, my age. And so, I mean, that could have been me or my best friend being like, "Hey, you got big fucking tits in our song." Luckily, it wasn't, as far as I recall.
Well, I do wonder what happened to the actor. I did look him up. I can't remember his name now, but it said he'd appeared in something in 1969 as well, which I think, knowing how IMDb sometimes is a little bit off, but I don't think he was like a 20-year-old short
like
person,
Peter
was he?
Bark.
No, he wasn't like Peter Bark, I don't think. Or maybe he was. But is that all you have for us, Dan?
That's all I've got, guys.
Okay, well, no problem. Well, thank you. Erik, what have you dug up for us?
Yeah, only a few things as well. One of the special effects artists on this is Vincent Gastini, and he went on to have quite a career. He did work on things like I Am Legend and World War Z or World War Z, and like Child's Play 3, and he did the makeup on the Silent Night reboot from 2012. But another effects artist on the film has the wonderful name Ken Brilliant. So I'm wondering if he was responsible for that wonderful elf makeup. But he actually went on to a good career too. He was on Interview with a Vampire, Jurassic Park, X-Files, etc., etc. I found that the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classifications, gave this an 18 certificate in May of 1990, and that they made some cuts, although it didn't specify on their website what those cuts were. But I can imagine probably particularly that Store Santa murder towards the start of the film would have been shortened, I reckon. I couldn't find any VHS artwork for it, though, for the UK. Could you, Justin?
I didn't see any, no.
And that's all the background I have.
Okay, well, thank you. Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, as I said before, this was put out on VHS by AIP Studios. Now, they were the leader in, pretty much this type of film, this cheapy, quickie stuff. If you go back and look at some of their labels, you'll see what I'm talking about. But apparently, I think I read that this got a very limited theatrical release in the States and that it was rated PG-13, which is kind of strange considering there's full frontal nudity of the mother character in the bathtub. So I don't know how true that is, or if it just kind of slipped by the censors or what. But no, that's pretty much all I could find on the film. There's not a whole lot out there.
Okay, well, thank you. Nathan, what have you got for us?
Dan Haggerty was in another very classic 80s slasher the same year called Terror Night.
Yes.
Indeed. Have we covered Terror Night? I think we have, haven't we?
We have. Yeah, we did an episode a few years ago.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Right. Okay. Well, I've got a few other bits. Say Dan Haggerty, as you mentioned, did Terror Night the same year. I found a newspaper article from 1987 where he said that he was working on producing family films because he thought most of North America were neighborhood types who didn't want shoot-'em-up chainsaw type movies. So obviously something changed quite drastically for Dan Haggerty between 1987 and 1989. He's obviously, the actor has passed away, but from what I've read from various people that were involved in the movie, that he was on a drug and booze bender during the shoot. Guastini, you mentioned, the FX guy. There's a story that he's recalls from where he mentions from the set, where he said that Dan Haggerty fell over. He fell over in the middle of a scene and landed, I think, on his back or his front, and suddenly his back pocket exploded with this kind of sudden blast of white powder.
Oh, had he been shopping for self-raising flour?
Possibly, but apparently it said that this Guastini said that it dissipated, and it turned out that Dan Haggerty was completely covered head to toe in coke. So not disparaging, the good name of someone was dead, but Grizzly Adams was obviously, apparently he was on a complete bender the whole time. So that kind of possibly explains why his kind of acting throughout it was a little bit stilted, perhaps. Interestingly enough, the film was a product of a production group that was set up by David Winters, who, if that sounds familiar, that was the British director who directed the last horror film with Joe Spinell and Carolyn Munro. And he set up the Action International Pictures in 1986 with David A. Pryor, who wasn't he the director of Sledgehammer, or was that someone else?
No, it was the Pryors, yeah.
Yes, the Pryor, wasn't it? Someone called Peter Uval. So they created this production company to shoot low-budget movies out of Colorado Springs. and they hired a director, Jeffrey Mandel, who was a graduate of UVLA film school. And as was the thing back then, they kind of sold the concept. They raised a budget of $150,000 on the concept one sheet mock-up only. So it was kind of quite common back then to raise money for films, which is why if you've ever seen the old classic varieties from the early 80s, they're full of adverts for movies that never got made because they were trying to raise money before they obviously failed to make to raise the budget for them. The FX for the film were the complete budget for the special effects was $10,000. So as you can imagine, that wasn't very much, which might explain the sort of Fraggle Rock latex elf. It was shot on over 16 days in Colorado Springs, which is a pretty quick turnaround. What I read, Dan, was it was actually shot on 16 mil rather than 35 mil. Whether or not that is the case, there's a good write-up there's a great little book called A Scary Little Christmas, A History of Yuletide Horror Films, 1972 to 2020, by Matthew C. Dupuy, where I got most of that information from. So thank you to that book. But that it looks at lots of Yuletide festive horror movies and does quite a lot of interviews with people behind them. So definitely worth picking up a copy if you can get hold of it. I think it's from McFarlane Press. And I think the only other thing was the film had the distinction. It was the first time that an elf had ever been used in a horror movie. So that's all I have.
It's because they had their elves on the shelves.
Something like that. Well, don't spoil. You don't want to spoil. Not that you can spoil Eric's joke of the week, but
hey,
before we do that, let's see what was the kind of consensus on the group, Joseph.
Surprisingly, 39 comments for Elves, and from that, Dave Felter writes, a deliciously mean-spirited stalking slasher that deserves a format upgrade ASAP. Such an off-center oddity and a must-see for lovers of iconoclastic curios. I love every warped frame. And Shane Lambert says, I remember thinking it was an utter piece of trash the first and only time I watched it. I am curious to see if my opinion will change, and let us know if it has, Mr. Lambert. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I've gotten a few emails asking what happened to our Twitter account, and honestly, with everything that's going on over there, our follower count was dropping like flies. And we never really got any interaction over there anyway, so it's just kind of a time thing. If you do want to follow us, we are on Facebook and Instagram. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and about a billion other podcatchers, both good and bad. We're also on Patreon, and we're bringing that Christmas cheer with our commentary for Silent Night, Deadly Night, which will drop at the end of this month. General nonsense and feedback, send that to the Hysteria Continues at gmail.com, and a happy ho 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 to everyone out there.
Excellent. And join us. Silent Night, Deadly Night is going to be a fun one to talk for our commentary for December. So looking forward to chatting about that. But something we're not looking forward to too much is this.
It's my joke of the week. It's so great and fantastic.
Why was the demon so aggressive in this film? Because he had no elf control. No elf control.
Thank you, Justin, for that scream.
I think I was trying to find the. I'm still.
Selfish relative.
I was trying to find the sad trombone, but I still have my new laptop's gone in for repair, and so I'm working my old laptop, which only opens 4 inches. Which Erik knows all about 4 inches, I'm sure.
I hate you, you dirty nun fucker.
Not in front of a guest, Erik.
Eric's gone crazy over there.
So, Elves. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And do you think we did it justice, Dan?
I think you did. I seriously did not expect... first of all, I didn't expect it to be a first-time watch for the entire crew. And I expected at least one of you to hate it. I'm not going to say which one. So I'm going to take this as a win, guys. A clean sheet win, and I'm happy to have it.
Excellent. Well, we all need a little festive treat at Christmas. So I think that was. It's not really. I say it kind of borrows from every horror toy box going, doesn't it? But it does borrow a little bit from the slasher movie. So I think we'll let it squeak by. And of course, certain people, no names mentioned, Joseph, have had some slightly questionable choices of slasher movies over the years. Terminator, cough cough. But
hey, I'm not the one who picked Rabid Grannies,
Nathan.
Well, so what are we covering next time?
We are going to cover Blood Cult.
Oh dear.
Oh, God.
Nathan.
Have you had the pleasure, Dan, of Blood Cult?
I have not, although I will be watching it before your episode drops.
Yes. Well, good luck is all I can say. But yeah, it sounds like a perfect Nathan thing. And are you going to follow it up with Revenge?
Well, I mean, eventually.
Eventually, of course. Excellent. So Dan, what is next for you on the podcast? What's coming up?
Well, we just launched an episode on Gremlins. We're doing our holiday special here, and then we're going to follow that up with the classic Batman Returns, which George hasn't seen. He hadn't seen the '89 Batman either, so we showed him that in season 1, and now it's finally Christmas time, and so he'll be going down the Keaton Penguin highway there. That's going to be fun. And then hopefully in the spring or maybe late winter, we're going to be doing a series of vampire movies. He's never seen any. And so obviously we'll be getting the Leraw's vampires out, as well as some of the more mainstream ones over the years.
I went to see Batman in the cinema in 1989, and somebody threw a full can of Coke at me, and it hit me in the back of the head, and then my head was sore.
I'm sorry. I've apologized for that, Erik, and I shit happens.
I knew it was you.
Apologies to that Coke can.
So, why would someone do that?
They were up on the balcony and I was downstairs because this was an old-fashioned cinema, and they just threw it. I'd like to think I wasn't targeted. It was just thrown randomly, but it hit me.
It's not nice. Not nice. Well, okay. Well, on that revelation, we shall say goodbye. So once again, Dan, thank you for joining us. And hopefully it's always a pleasure to turn people on to a great podcast. So do check out the Remedial Film Class podcast on all good podcatchers. And we'll look forward to having you back on the show at some point.
I appreciate it. And guys, I can't thank you enough for having me on. I've been a listener for, going on 8 or 10 years now. And so to hear the joke of the week in person with the ability to stifle my laughter and not mark out for that wonderful joke. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
You actually had to stifle laughter? Wow.
How rude.
Yes, no need to be sarcastic, Dan. But okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And what are we playing out with?
Well, it's 1989, and the Nintendo is becoming an affordable household commodity. Dan Haggerty is smoking a lot. And the Nazis, I assume, are listening not to cadence-assuring marching music, but Funky Funky Christmas by the New Kids on the Block.
Blimey. Okay. As if things couldn't get any stranger. So, okay. Well, thanks for listening. And hopefully you'll hear this before Christmas. And if you do, have a fantastic Christmas. And keep warm. And don't let Santa come inside with his big chopper.
Or do.
Well, I'm sure Erik does every year. But so thanks for listening to Hysteria Continues, and we'll catch you next time when we're joining a blood cult. So say goodbye to good people.
I don't want to join a blood cult.
Hey, it's worth it.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a funky, fun Christmas.